Aloha, and welcome to the East-West Center Seminars Live. I'm Susan Kreifels, Media Program Manager at the East-West Center. Thank you to our viewers around the world who are joining us today. Our program is one of immense importance, the future of women in Afghanistan. This is a topic that touches the hearts and minds of people around the world, especially those who know that equality of women is key to all of our futures. Additionally, what happens to women journalists in Afghanistan greatly impacts media coverage coming out of the country. It also impacts the future of media around the world. Maria Ressa, an East-West Center media alumna, I am proud to say, shared the Nobel Peace Prize last week for her courage and dedication to preserving free and independent media, truth in reporting, and an end to social media campaigns that harass and threaten journalists. Women journalists are the main targets. The Nobel Prize has given renewed global attention to these important issues. The East-West Center is proud to have 120 Afghan alumni who have participated in our education, journalism, leadership, and women's entrepreneurial programs. They are such important members of our EWC family. Now I am honored to introduce today's distinguished speakers. They are in alphabetical order. Ms. Anita Bhatia, Assistant Secretary General and UN Women's Deputy Executive Director for Resource Management, UN System Coordination, Sustainability, and Partnerships. Assistant Secretary General Bhatia has also had a distinguished career at the World Bank Group, serving in various senior leadership and management positions, both at headquarters and in the field. Ms. Samira Hamidi, Regional Campaigner at Amnesty International South Asia Regional Office, based in Sri Lanka, where her work focuses on human rights, the peace process, women's rights, and transitional justice issues in Afghanistan. She has also served as Program and Advocacy Director at the Empowerment Center for Women and Country Director at the Afghan Women's Network. Ms. Farida Neghzad, Director of the Center for Protection of Afghan Women Journalists. She left her country after the return of the Taliban and now resides in Canada. Ms. Neghzad was formerly Editor-in-Chief and Director at WACT News Agency, where she covered human rights and women's issues. Her honors include the Courage in Journalism Award from the International Women's Media Foundation and the International Press Freedom Award from the Committee to Protect Journalists. And Ambassador Roya Rahmani, former Afghanistan ambassador to the US, the first woman to hold this position. She is currently Senior Advisor at the Atlantic Council South Asia Center, Distinguished Fellow at the Institute for Women, Peace and Security at Georgetown University, and a Senior Fellow for International Security at the New America Foundation. She served as the first Director General for Regional Cooperation at the Afghan Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has been featured in Time magazine as a, quote, fierce advocate of peace on Afghan terms. To our very distinguished speakers, thank you all for joining us today. I would like to take a moment to share our webinar protocols. Today's webinar is on the record, recorded on Zoom, and will be made available on YouTube for viewing and sharing. Viewers, your microphones and videos are turned off. Each panelist will speak for up to 8 minutes. Q&A will take place after panelist remarks. To submit a question, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen and specify if there is a particular panelist you wish to answer. Join the conversation on Twitter using hashtag EWC Seminars Live and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EWC Seminars. Finally, check our website for webinar information, registration, full speaker bios, and YouTube links at www.ewc.org. www.eastwestcenter.org/EWC seminars live. From there, you can also access information about other professional opportunities at the center. Finally, I'm delighted to introduce today's moderator. Ms. Dilrukshi Handanetti is an international award-winning investigative journalist and foreign correspondent who currently serves as executive director at the Colombo-based Center for Investigative Reporting Sri Lanka, which she co-founded with 2 colleagues. She also runs an information literacy program and has trained journalists in Afghanistan in recent years. I am proud that she is an alumna of East West Center media programs and one of the most dedicated journalists I know. So Dilrukshi, I put the program into your very capable hands, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. And thanks to the East West Center. Good morning, good evening to our distinguished panel of speakers and all of you joining us today from different corners of the world. To get started, I really want to say a warm welcome to our speakers once again. I'm so honored to be talking to all of you today. Millions of Afghans have been deeply affected by decades of conflict, displacement, poverty, and a collapsing economy. The humanitarian situation in Afghanistan was one of the worst in the world even before the Taliban took over. By mid-2021, nearly half the population, that would be nearly 18 million people, were already in need of humanitarian and protection assistance. Protection and safety risks to civilians, particularly to women, children, and persons living with disability, remain very high. Yet, in the history of Afghanistan, women and girls have played a pivotal role in pushing the envelope. In 1919, Afghan women became eligible to vote before many other countries. The first girls' school was opened in 1921, and in 1964, Constitution introduced equality for every citizen. The August 14th events have caused the situation to drastically alter. The gains made by women are being eroded as of now. Afghanistan's new regime had initially promised it would respect human rights, also those of women. But in handling of dissent and the curtailment of women's freedoms are causing serious doubts about sincerity. The Taliban recently announced an all-male administration and said women should focus on giving birth and raising children. They also ruled that universities will be gender segregated. We see reports of harassment and violence. We also see how women publicly defend their rights, courageously so, to education, to work, the freedom to choose and to live lives free of violence. Meanwhile, a recent survey by the Afghanistan National Journalists Union, NJU, highlighted the grave situation faced by journalists and media workers since the Taliban took over Afghanistan, recording increasing attacks on media freedom and the safety of journalists. The findings highlighted grave risks, particularly faced by female journalists who comprise more than 67% of the journalists and media workers in the country. Media houses are shutting down, a reduction in women-led programming is taking place, and female journalists being removed from their posts. But to unpack all of this and to discuss what is possible, the possible future of women in Afghanistan, we have with us a highly representative and eminent panel of speakers. They will help us understand the current situation in Afghanistan after the Taliban take over, the complexities as well as the challenges. They will also tell us what is being done, what can be, and what should be done. What's our role? How do we move forward? So welcome again to this webinar. As Susan said, we all have 8 minutes. Every speaker gets 8 minutes for your initial remarks. I will pose a brief query soon afterwards to each speaker. Let's start now with Samira Hamidi, our first speaker. Samira is South Asia campaign of Amnesty International and was just introduced briefly. Samira, the floor is yours. You have 8 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Dilrukshi, for the introduction. First of all, thank you, East West Center, for very timely event and for the opportunity to share some thoughts on the future of Afghan women. And I'm also grateful to be among other panelists in today's discussion, and thank you everyone who has joined from different parts of the world. I I really appreciate your time and interest on this discussion. I think what I want to do is just to pick up from where you touched base shortly on historical journey of Afghan women, and then where Afghan women came and what happened to them today, and then discuss I have some recommendations to end with. I think Afghan women have been part of different systems and different struggles in Afghanistan, not only in 20 years, but for decades before. What Afghan women did in the last 20 years was just to carry forward the advocacy, the work, and the contribution that our seniors and other women before us have been doing. Having said that, when we look at the Afghanistan history after 1919, there were a lot of efforts to provide, the space and opportunities for women's participation. For women were included. We did have, legal documents like Afghanistan Constitution, which were considered quite progressive when it came to women's rights. King's own family, for example, the wife and sister were very much engaged in terms of making sure that women are engaging and women are part of the system. As you spoke about media, for example, the first ever woman magazine was produced and included a lot of historical views and a lot of information on women, of course, at that time, and this continued for during different regimes for decades. Women have been part of the political system in Afghanistan. Not that only last 20 years women were parliamentarians or ministers or cabinet members. We had women cabinet members, ministers, senators, parliamentarians, ambassadors in the past, and women have been contributing. I wouldn't say equally, but they had their space and they were included. Of course, within the country, women had access to education, women had access to employment, women were in the media, women were in the art and in other social and cultural platforms. Of course, women's representation as teachers, doctors, police officers, army officers were notable, and then a vibrant civil society representation of women, of course, was there. I have so many of our seniors that I've learned so much from, and from their struggle and from their advocacy and from their work. Of course, there was a period of time that women were abandoned once again. There was a time where women were not directly contributing. They did not have the space when the civil war started in Afghanistan between 92 to 96, and then when Taliban took over between 96 to 2001, women were abandoned. They did not have opportunity in space for direct engagement. But even then, women who were living as refugees in Pakistan and in other countries, they were very active. They were still speaking for women's rights in Afghanistan. They were still contributing for girls' education. They were still trying to raise awareness about the situation of Afghan women. And the 20 years was an opportunity for Afghan women. I think any country in the world, when it goes to a post-war kind of recovery situation, and when you get involvement of international community who has money and who's there to support you, you want to benefit from it, and you want to use those opportunities for improving the situation on the ground, and that's exactly what Afghan women did. And why I give this brief narrative is that there is usually a lot of kind of wrong narrative that 20 years Afghan women and the Westerns are now have left, so women's rights have also vanished in Afghanistan and all those things, which usually people do not reconnect with the history of Afghan women. I think what we are seeing on women's rights and girls' rights in Afghanistan since 15 August is very clear. We are unfortunately back to a very dark period of history that women had passed between 96 to 2001. Unfortunately, Taliban are the same when it comes to the women's rights. They are not open. They are not responsive to inclusion of women. They have gone on record since they have taken control that, why should women be ministers? Why should women be decision makers? We don't need them. But they have even given this example of, oh, women are good to sit at home, get married, give birth to brave men like us. One of them was speaking to the media. So this is a very specific view that they have on women, that women are just for marriage and for giving birth to children. So that's it. I think what's happening in Afghanistan is a result of a lot of failures, as a result of what Afghan women have been saying for the past 10 years, and nobody listened to them. For the past 10 years, Afghan women were very specific on their calls, and they were very concerned about today's situation. They had predicted today's situation. They had a lot of fears. They had their analysis that Taliban are not changed and that Taliban will not welcome women's rights and women's gains in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, what we are seeing today is a clear example of that. As you rightly said, despite of the fact that they are using media for gaining international legitimacy, and they are continuously saying we are respecting women's rights and we will be allowing girls' education, but they really need to put their words into action if they mean it. And that action part is missing. It's almost 2 months that they are in charge of the country. What they have done is they have asked women to sit at home. Women have lost their jobs. Women have lost their incomes. And there are so many women who are who are actually supporting their families financially, and today they are lost and they don't know how to support their families. I think, of course, there will be opportunities for me to further explain, but I think what needs to be done right now is to get the narrative correct, and that to actually talk about these gains that women had, that they are not giving up, that they are not ready to give up, that they are protesting, that they are calling for their rights, that they are, those women in Kabul and in provinces who are protesting, leaving the house, knowing that they are facing men with guns, that they can be shot, but they're still moving out, and they're still asking for their fundamental rights, which is in line with our religion, which is in line with international human rights law, is giving a very strong message. And I would like to close by saying that, look at that bravery and look at that dedication that Afghan women have back at home. And I really hope that, we all will be the ones who will be able to help them get out of the situation. I have no answers for how and which ways and which means, but when I see their bravery, it gives me a lot of motivation and a lot of reason to continue speaking about women's rights in Afghanistan. I'll stop here and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I have a quick follow-up question, Samira. You did say that you're awed by the bravery you see among Afghan women. But do you think, from your experience, is there a way to push the envelope with the Taliban regime, as they may want to work towards gaining some level of international acceptance? Will it help to push the women's agenda, at least using that?
I think what needs to happen is that, especially international community must ensure when they are engaging with the Taliban, not to normalize that absence of women is okay. We need international community to, when they are meeting Taliban, to go with women, to have women in their delegations, to let women lead the discussions with them, because that's where, you know, Taliban has to change. That's where Taliban has to have to understand that women, you know, women are important. Secondly, of course, I don't think Taliban can survive without international legitimacy and the financial aid that Afghanistan needs, because Afghanistan has been, unfortunately, a donor-dependent country. I think you know, there has to be specific calls on keeping the gains of Afghan women and allowing women to continue what they have been doing. Women have not been doing anything un-Islamic and against Afghan culture that they are now just imprisoning women once again and saying, oh, you need to sit at home. This is my second suggestion. And my third suggestion is also that you know, negotiations are still going on with the Taliban. International community has a lot of leverage, and international community had a lot of leverage in the past also on Taliban. And I think they are meeting them individually. There are a lot of spaces that they are discussing. While I do see in social media that they are saying that, you know, women's rights is a priority for us, this and that. But when we look at the example of, you know, allowing girls to go to school above grade 6, we clearly see that, you know, maybe they're not using their leverage, or maybe they are not, you know, they are not putting a lot of pressure on Taliban. So these are clear examples that Taliban have done in front of us. You know, abandoning girls above grade 6 to go to school is against human rights norms and human rights values, and that's where, like, you know, we need a stronger language and stronger push from international community. These are some of the thoughts that I can immediately say. And also in terms of those women who are in Afghanistan, look, everybody is not evacuated. Everybody will not be able to leave, you know, Afghanistan. There would be women and you know, women activists and women in the media who still would like to stay in Afghanistan and work. I know some of them who have opted to stay in Afghanistan and work. Their protection, working with them, making sure that, you know, they will be supported financially, but also in terms of, you know, protection bit, or some of the things that the international community needs to plan. And when they are pledging funds for, you know, humanitarian aid, when they are pledging funds for other development aid in Afghanistan, they need to make sure that there is a specific quota for Afghan women.
Thank you, Samira. You made all of us really, really think. And before I move to the next speaker, I would like to remind all our audience that you can submit your questions via Zoom chat. Please use the Q&A access and submit all your questions. Let me now move to our next speaker, Farida Nexat. Farida is a pioneering journalist who's a very well-known journalist, very well-respected in Afghanistan, who was forced to leave the country following the Taliban takeover. Farida?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
8 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning for some, maybe good evening. Thank you very much for A-Swiss Center that make possible this seminar or this event. At least, yeah, we are in a situation, unfortunately, in the media, you see, maybe you observe for yourself and monitor. Unfortunately, the media situation is worse than every section or every field of in the country, because it is affected much more by Taliban and also the women. This is one of the important. Rather, I should mention that Taliban from the beginning were opposite of the women and women names, and they still not accept women as an active member of the society. This is the big matter and the issue. I should mention before that I should go to your question, and maybe I should have some notes. I should shortly say, unfortunately, since Taliban take over control of Afghanistan, about 90% of women, unfortunately, they lost their jobs and they're mostly sit at home. About 80% of the media just close and due this restriction or a financial problem. 5 journalists, unfortunately, include of one woman, lost their lives, or maybe I should say that killed. And still a number of women journalists, I can say more than 20% of them, female journalists, left Afghanistan because of the situation. And a number of women journalists still in a situation that really, and trauma. It is not easy to be in such situation because mostly those women, really senior women journalists, work as a journalist, investigate journalist, presenter, or any section or field there. When Taliban take over provinces, they'll shift to Kabul. So it was like, you see, suddenly Kabul came under control, or they're shift from the provinces. And now you can imagine how they're suffering and how they're living without any protection. Actually, I should mention that unfortunately, we expected from the international organization, which always slogan about human rights, and especially women's rights and press freedom in Afghanistan, most of them took like silence, and some of them they did, of course, they took some reaction about evacuation of some journalists, and I'm thankful I'm also one of them that at least got to leave Afghanistan. But some others, it was not enough because women journalists, I agree with Samira. Honestly, I should say departure of all journalists from the country is not maybe it should not be the solution, but there are some how we can continue, and some of journalists, and maybe those journalists, they're like a junior, they graduated from Faculty of Journalism, they're just very interested to work. But of course, there is money restriction, there is no space for them, no guarantee for their job security or safety. And even for their self-safety, there is no guarantee that they should go and do their professional work. So this is very important that we should put pressure on Taliban. They should accept the presence of women, especially in the media, as an active member of the community. And we should work for their protection and for their support that make the possible ground for them that they should work and continue their professional, and especially the censorship and it means restriction against journalists and media. It's very important they should. And the first thing that I think is still, this is very important, the international community, solidarity or cooperation. I think cooperation and collaboration for the solidarity is very important. They should have, for example, the unity of one voice and one position, and how it's work, because journalists still need spiritually and financially the support of international, and especially international and institution which work for the defense of human rights and journalists. It's very important. For example, they can maybe the best condition, official recognition of Taliban to international community. It's very important before international community or organization or even countries recognize Taliban. There should be some condition that they should first, it should be like lobby, it should be like together work on this issue. Or maybe issuance of the joint resolution, then a statement or campaign about it means online presence or something for return of female journalists, that they should have the safe returning to the media organization. And from the media organization, the restriction should be finished and end, because most of, as they're writing to me, and I am still in contact with female journalists. For example, if they want to go to any media organization, first of all, they don't get permission from the door of the media organization. Even they don't allow them to go to enter to the media organization. This is very important that they should have this, finish this restriction and give permission women to go if they are interested. Because if they kick women from the community, and especially women journalists, it means we kill a number of society, because we have more than 50% of women in Afghanistan. How they can ignore these women from the society or community? So this is, for example, many violations happen against women. There is very important that reaction and condemnation, it means condemns or condemnation on the violences against women or civil society activists or journalists from the international community. It can be effective for all, and especially for being working for as a journalist in Afghanistan. I think this is, and the last one, I have something that investigation and inquiry, the cases of murder, violations, cases against journalists. It is very important. The international community should not be quiet. And we already has them, and the previous government also, it was a big issue, impunity. There was no system of punishment. So we don't want, when Taliban talking about their justice, so we need the international organization should follow the cases of violations, murders, and any traits, especially the murders of the journalists. And the 2 months and before, many journalists was beaten badly. I know about 2 of them suffer from even damage. One, he's like not able to hear from one ear, and the other is has some high problem. His has it means damage, or he can't see properly like before. So this is the issues when Taliban announced the amnesty and general amnesty, and still they are behaving like something that is it's obligatory. People should live, and especially the media worker. So this is very important. The international community work together for the, and also the finance support is very important. We should not forget that in such situation in Afghanistan, it is a crisis, economic crisis. And if we don't care, there will be a human crisis as well. So this is very important. We should note that only those journalists, and especially women journalists, they are still waiting for the evacuation. We should have the priority. We should have, like, categorize. We should out them safely out. We should seriously work this organization. Then we should have the second option. Those they are still willing to continue their professional work in Afghanistan, and what the step should be like for their safety and protection. Thank you. I think if I have some time more, otherwise maybe we have some more question and we'll answer. So this is.
Thank you, Farida. You highlighted the importance of protection for women and women journalists particularly. We also know that Afghanistan is giving birth to a large community of exiled journalists, and it's growing, and more people are waiting to leave the country. But we all understand that it's not possible for everyone to leave, and there will be so many left behind at the end of the day. And how can they work? How can they be protected? How can they be supported to stay back and continue to work? Because at the end of the day, many of them will be left behind. Not everyone will have the luxury or the support to leave the country and find a different space and a place to continue their work. You have a couple of minutes for a quick response, please.
Yeah, exactly. As I before mentioned, it's very important. We should have the work space for them. We should create some space and guarantee for their safety, that they have the job safety when they are going inside the institution. Then regarding their meaningful presence, it's very important, because if they are still willing, and of course it is a kind of accepting the risk and the challenge they're going to work. But the media worker, and especially the government of Taliban, they should understand that they should not put pressure that these people still they are willing to stay in country and work. They should take this opportunity from them. And Afghanistan, without the presence of women, it will be kind of, it's a trauma. It's all for a nightmare. It means it is very important that we should have this space. And of course, as I repeat this, the international community collaboration and cooperation is very important for the unity, to put pressure, even open letter, issuing as the declaration, open letter, or any kind, it's kind of maybe campaign to have support women and put pressure on the government of Taliban that you have to accept. They should finish these boundaries. They should finish these restrictions. This is very important. For example, it is nonsense. What does it mean if they put pressure on women that you should not use like heel shoes when you're coming? What does it mean? It is not related to any religions or Islamic or Sharia. They're making fun on Islam. So I think there should be a study, logically behave with women, not something like all the time they insult women by the name of Islam. This is kind of not acceptable. We have very prominent women. We have very committed women. They are still fighting. They are still doing their great part of job in Afghanistan. With nobody think that in such situation they are still in a fight. So they should accept women as a strong people or person of the community, and they should give chance in every section, especially in media. I think this is very important, because one thing I should say, if they don't give the chance for women, you will lose a number of voices, because these women journalists, as you know, Afghanistan is a sensitive country regarding the cultural and it means different aspects. So these women were the voice for other women, which were not heard for a long time, even for their progress and promotion, even for the violation or for the any injustice against women. So these were women. They bring the issue and the international community and the government that to bring the attention of to solve this problem. How they can kick women journalists. So at part of society and community, and people of Afghanistan will be not heard even internationally. And this is, I should call on the international organization and on media organization. They have the access. Recently, this is a human crisis in Afghanistan, and we suggest and request from them that they should use their possibility and the access of information and do the inquiry about this crisis. This is very important, because many of journalists, they are in a situation, they are in the limitation, they are in the boundaries, they are restriction regarding the press freedom and also the access to information. So these people at least bring these issues to the international community. What is really going on, and what is Taliban committed or they had promised about the general amnesty. This is very important, because we don't have any access. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Farida. I think from Samira and Farida, we heard all the problems, the complexities, the challenges before Afghan women. And now we have Ms. Anita Bhatia, Assistant Secretary General and the Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. And I think the UN response is extremely important. And what you have to say is truly significant to all the women here and the women of Afghanistan. We have challenges. And Ms. Bhatia, you're most likely to be the one who's able to tell us what should we do now, what could be, and what should be the international response. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dilrukshi. And let me just start by saying good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, because I'm sure we're joined by people all around the world. And I want to actually start by saying a very big thank you to the East-West Center for hosting a very important conversation on a very pertinent topic, because this opportunity for us to share a little bit of what the UN is doing and to discuss with all of you how we can support Afghani women to sustain the gains made, as Samira pointed out, not just in the last 20 years, but for many decades, is really crucial for the international community and for the UN, a litmus test for the work that we are doing in Afghanistan. So I want to just say I really welcome the collective efforts of everybody who's in this room to act now with a sense of urgency to meet the needs of the Afghan people, but particularly of women and girls who are suffering, as we can clearly see, reversals in rights and in freedoms that have been gained over many decades. And what we see is that hard-won progress is really at grave risk, and that the Taliban takeover so far has meant broken promises. We have not yet seen the Taliban walking the talk and what they have said that they will do in terms of protecting women's rights. And so I'd like to focus on a couple of things that require immediate attention and support. First, I want to say that the UN is very committed to staying and delivering for the people of Afghanistan. So not just UN Women, but other UN agencies are all present in Afghanistan physically. Yes, we have some of our international staff and even some of our local staff whose lives are at risk have left the country and are in Almaty or in Istanbul or Islamabad and different places. But we are committed to staying and delivering because our obligation is to the people of Afghanistan. But we see that there is a very important imperative to focus on a couple of things. And this is what we as UN Women want to see happen. First, we want to see girls to return to school. Girls continue to be prevented from returning to their schools, and this is undermining not just their future, but the future of the country. Second, we want women to return to their jobs, because most employed women today are facing major impediments, which is depriving them and their families of self-fulfillment and earning a livelihood. And it is depriving Afghanistan of their contributions to the country's development. We know that women entrepreneurs have been forced to freeze their businesses, either due to security concerns, mobility restrictions, or the crippling banking crisis and the cash crisis. So, we ask that all of this be reversed. And very importantly, because there is a humanitarian crisis in the country and we are delivering humanitarian aid, we are asking that female aid workers must join their male counterparts in providing humanitarian assistance, because aid cannot be made conditional on whether it is men or women delivering it, but also we know that cultural norms are such that many female-headed households will not get aid if they are not women delivering the aid. So for both of those reasons, we are asking that aid workers must include women and that there should be no conditions put on who can deliver the aid. We would like the women's protection centers to reopen. These centers have provided life-saving services for women and girls who are fleeing violence. And right now, and UN Women has a long history of supporting these women's protection centers, because there's also, unfortunately, a very high level of violence against women. So in July this year, there used to be 24 women's protection centers in 23 of the 34 provinces, and many were funded by us, others were funded by the US. There were 25 family guidance centers in 24 provinces. But if we look at the end of September and see of this network of women's protection centers, there are only 2 that are functional, and both are in Kabul. And so, for all of the centers that we had in the other provinces have been forced to close down, and we want to see these reopened. So we are asking in our dialogue with the Taliban that these centers be allowed to open and that they allowed to be function, because right now there is very limited service in Balk, in Kunar, in Takhar, and Nangarhar, and some other places. But we want that network to be reopened. And we are asking that women's human rights defenders be protected, because they are key advocates for women's rights and for freedoms. And they are really the driving force in many ways, not the only contributors, but a major part of the gains that have been made to date. And as was mentioned previously, women's rights are protected by the Constitution. Afghanistan is a signatory to the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And it was an unconditional accession to the convention. There are no, reservations. There are articles in the Afghani constitution which guarantee full freedom and liberty to women. So, right now we are saying what the Secretary General said yesterday is broken promises lead to broken dreams. And that is the state of women's rights in Afghanistan today. So let's be very clear about that as the international community, our dialogue has to, and it is including this, and we as UN Women are, as part of the UN system, are really pushing for this to be a key part of the discussion. And so, in terms of what others can do, it's really key that we continue to call on the Taliban to include women in the administrative structure. Women must be allowed to participate in political life, in economic life. And, there is as yet no evidence of a Taliban 2.0. There are no women, as had been mentioned, in the administration. We have seen women being publicly beaten and without any consequences. And, I just want to take a minute to just applaud the courage and the bravery of these women who come out and fight and protest and demand their rights, even though they know, as both Farida and Samira said, that they could face, basically the ultimate test, which is losing their own lives. And so we will continue to advocate for the protection and the promotion of the full spectrum of women's human rights, including the freedom of movement, the right to education, the return to work, and the right to participate in both public and political life. And so the fact that we are still in Afghanistan, we have an office there, we have people there, that we have stayed to deliver for the people, means that gives us an opportunity as part of the dialogue of the UN to continue to push for this. It isn't something where I can say we've seen huge success, because Taliban continue to break all their promises with respect to women. And we are asking them, and asking the international community to not give up on this agenda, because this is absolutely vital, not just to the future of Afghanistan, but actually it is a test for the international community about how we can hold the Taliban accountable for delivering on their own promises. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I think you really highlighted the many problems that that you do encounter in getting the aid across and keeping people safe. But the Women, Peace and Security agenda lays great emphasis on civil and political rights. How can the women's economic and social rights actually be, and also the right to security and their right to participation be protected under the prevailing circumstances? What can the international community do to assist? Because it's beyond just, it's not possible alone for Afghan people to do that. The international response has to be a supportive one. So what are your thoughts on that, Ms.
I mean, first of all, I think delivery of support and humanitarian assistance has to be direct. It has to be through, organizations on the ground so that it reaches people directly. And there has to be a distinction made between that money, which is essential for really humanitarian work, and that money, which is actually a gift or, is helping to prop up and enable the functioning, which is actually not humanitarian. So you have to distinguish between what's humanitarian and what's more longer term development money. And that's not easy to do. So, there are no easy answers. It would really be irresponsible to say, it's easy to figure out how to do this. No, actually, it's not that easy. But I think one thing is clear, the country is facing a humanitarian crisis, and that is why all the humanitarian UN agencies are there on the ground delivering directly to people. And I think that needs to continue. That is one of the ways. But the other thing is, we cannot stop talking about this. The world's attention is now, with social media, everybody has a very short attention span. So there's a new crisis and people forget. And, we cannot let people forget about the situation of women in Afghanistan. And it is already, I see, in press coverage and in media, this is no longer front page news. And so it is very easy for this to disappear into, today it's page 3, in a few days it's going to be on the last page. And it's not going to be top of mind for people because there will be some other crisis and the world's attention will shift. So I think a really important thing we can do is to make sure we keep the focus and not forget the women and girls of Afghanistan.
Thank you so much. There are questions already coming in for you, so I'll start with you soon. But now let me move to our final speaker, a very seasoned Afghan diplomat and former Afghan ambassador to the US. Ambassador Rahmani, would you like to take the floor now?
Thank you very much. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, depending on wherever you're sitting. Thank you, East West Center, for organizing the panel, and greetings to all distinguished fellow panelists. On August 31st this year, the United States ended its longest war after 2 decades of intervention in Afghanistan. But did the war also ended for Afghan people, and particularly for Afghan women? The answer is no. The past decades armed women with education and opportunities. They have given Afghan women the ammunition to break down institutional barriers and the armored vests to help shield themselves against the deep-rooted discrimination in Afghan society. Women empowerment was, in fact, by far the most tangible achievements of the international community's intervention. It is a complex phenomenon. Women empowerment is not easy. It takes time. However, it used to be often characterized just as a checkbox that must be fulfilled, or a standalone issue that was in its entirety a issue and independent of security issues, development issues, and economic issues. Although that there was clear provision for equality in the Constitution and laws, achieving empowerment and equality in practice have been a huge struggle for Afghan women. But when there was room made for them, Afghan women went full on. They did not only check the boxes, but they pushed through some of the biggest institutional barriers hindering their progress and society's progress. The international community's insistence and reminders that their financial support would be conditional to inclusion and empowerment of women was very important. But now the question is, how much of these achievements and which one of them could be sustained? The 4 million girls who were enrolled in schools, the 28% women who sat in the Afghan parliament, the 30% of women who were comprising the civil service, all are out of school, jobs, and politics. However, all of these women who were educated cannot be uneducated, who were empowered cannot settle for less. And at least while this is happening at this point, they know what they can achieve and they know what they should be striving for. With the return of the Taliban to power, there is no question that not only for Afghanistan, but at the regional level, there would be huge setbacks, especially because they are pushing the hardest working members of society, the women, out of the public sphere. I will repeat what I have been repeating all along over the past several weeks as a mantra. I am continuously asked what is going to happen to Afghanistan. And I have one answer. What happens to Afghanistan is going to be determined by what happens to Afghan women. That is a determinant factor. What happens to Afghanistan is what is going to happen to Afghan women. It is because women are neither only childbearers, as the Taliban have claimed, nor are just a checkbox, as it was in the past exercise. Empirical evidences show that women dramatically improve focus and performance on a multitude of the government initiatives, including intelligence collection, social welfare, development, the enforcement of the legal protection, the promotion of the government transparency, and much more. Their commitment to inclusivity, open discussion, and fostering peace within the family enables them to successfully and positively engage with individuals and at the community levels. In a society ravaged by war and a culture of war, women's contributions are absolutely essential for the community empowerment. And particularly now that the international community is debating how to support Afghan people without empowering Taliban. While there are many international instruments and mechanisms that may compel governments around the world to pay attention or check their own boxes for their prestige or position or commitment, whatever it is, they may not be necessarily useful with this kind of government now in place in Afghanistan. So we need to be very practical in our approaches and also very creative with them. It is women issues must be practically incorporated in the policies. Sometimes some people characterize women as beautiful creatures, quotes unquote, and would like to treat them also as an ornament in the public sphere. But women's inclusion in society is not a nicety. It's not an act of charity. It is a necessity. It's a necessity for everyone, for men and women's welfare and progress alike. There are many different scenarios detailing the potential for what could happen in the upcoming months and years for Afghanistan, and how the international community should use its diplomatic and financial and humanitarian levers while dealing in Afghanistan. However, the scenario that will foster lasting peace in Afghanistan is the one that centers around the biggest triumph that we all achieved together over the past decades, which are women's empowerment and leadership. Women's leadership is community leadership. It determines the future welfare of the people, especially since over 65% of the Afghans are under the age of 25. The international community, once again, for its own sake and for that of the regional peace, must continue to focus on and invest in security and human rights equally, because they just enhance one another. They need to take practical steps. For example, ensuring that connectivity is not lost on the ground. Other panelists very elaborately spoke about this. It is impossible to operate in a black hole. In order to continue supporting women and civil society, we need to come together to create innovative strategies that provide consistent access to the internet, to cellular services, electricity, messaging platform, and much more. This will be essential to ensure that grave violations of human rights and dignity will not go unaccounted for. And it will also help us understand more about what is happening on the ground, as Ms. Bhatia was just talking about, that the news is fading, the news around Afghanistan, and the interest is fading. And this is a normal cycle for news to take. So, but we have to make sure that the information continues to flow. Another step would be, again, something that was spoken about, and I don't think that we lose much for re-emphasizing on it, and that is to empower the communities, to empower women, to deliver aid through the communities, and ensure that women have a leadership role in it. That would achieve the goals that we all have, and also help women remember, and the communities remember, the leadership that they have demonstrated and the essential role that they can continue to play. In summary, to end the war is to find peace, and peace will never be achieved when half of the society is oppressed. The true meaning of peace is to give everyone a voice and a stake in the future that they are going to build for themselves, and to own it responsibly. I thank you all.
Thank you, Ambassador Rahmani. Just a couple of questions, but I will be very brief. Now with the Taliban's takeover, women's space, illustrated by the first two speakers very eloquently, is shrinking rapidly. But how can this women's space can be defended? Is there a way that we can use counter-terror measures, national security policies be redesigned in a way that women can be prioritized, that they definitely can be woven into the design space, so that there is something to look forward to, that women do have an opportunity to contribute and continue to contribute?
Well, it again goes back to what levers are left for the international community to utilize. The diplomacy with the regional countries would be certainly one, through the humanitarian assistance and aid, which is the decision or the something that is required, and many of the countries are very concerned about this looming crisis. Would be another one, to incorporate and make sure that women continue to play a leading role. And then some creative approaches. For example, if the Taliban continue to exercise and conduct themselves the way that they have demonstrated so far, by not allowing girls, for example, to seek education, to go to schools beyond the middle school, how can you reach out to them? How you can provide them with the educational tools? There is much happening around the world online. How would that be sustained? How would that be possible? What would be the creative, meaningful ways to engage them?
Thank you. I think we are just about to move into the Q&A session. So let's have a camera switched on. I also understand, Ms. Bhatia, you have to leave a little early. So let me start with you. The first question is, we do have several questions. So the first one is, can you provide specific examples of international aid still being provided to Afghanistan and still available within the country?
Yes, I can actually. And the Secretary General spoke about this in his statement on Afghanistan yesterday. So several UN agencies are involved in direct delivery of humanitarian assistance. Here, the World Food Programme, for instance, has been delivering food in Kabul, in Herat, in Mazar, and Kandahar. WHO has delivered medical supplies that have treated 10,000 people for diarrhea, and it has opened 2 new COVID-19 labs in the country. UNFPA is running 170 family health houses in remote areas, which provides medical supplies until the end of the year. And these facilities will enable about 10,000 safe birth deliveries every year. UNFPA is also providing health kits in Kandahar to the regional hospital and in Kunduz. UNHCR, UNICEF, and NGO partners have reached people who are internally displaced within Afghanistan, who have left their hometowns and are now mainly in Kabul, with relief items. FAO and NGO partners have also delivered animal feed to farmers for their herds. So this is just in 1 week. Everything I've described here is 1 week's worth of work that the UN has done. And so, we are going to continue to do this because this is a matter of saving lives. This is just life and death for many people. And so we feel we are really in a race against time. And this is some of the work that we have been doing. And it has been done with the cooperation of the Taliban, who have granted access to these areas when the UN has requested it. And they have also provided security so that the aid can be delivered. And so, the number of kind of incidents that happen during humanitarian delivery sometimes have declined because there is this security. So this is saving lives, but it's not going to solve the problem if the economy of Afghanistan collapses, which is very likely given the current situation. It's a real and imminent threat. And this is something that we are working to avoid. And I should say, most of Afghanistan's economy is informal. It's not formal. And who is predominantly in that informal economy is women. So, this issue of keeping alive the focus on women's rights and that advocacy is a very key part of what we are doing. And it is going to be a critical role for us as we go forward because, we have to guard against complacency and we have to guard against this disappearing from the radar screen of policymakers because they get wrapped up in other issues. I'm sorry, Dilrukshi, I can't hear you. And I'm not sure anybody else can.
Sorry about that. So Samira, the next question is for you. Do you believe the international community will pressure the Taliban on women's rights issues? And what specific efforts do you think might be most effective in that regard?
See, what happened in Afghanistan is not something out of a sudden, right? what happened in Afghanistan was a series of events and series of developments that took place over last period of couple of years. And particularly when I look at the whole discussion around the peace process and the involvement of the United States directly with the Taliban. Signing a deal with the Taliban, unconditional agreement and release of 5,000 prisoners from Afghan prisoners who were majority of them were accused of serious and gross violations in Afghanistan, the suicide attacks, the civilians killings, the assassinations that had taken place, and this of course followed with the announcement of Biden administration and the NATO for full withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was unconditional. Has created a lot of distrust and has created a lot of uncertainty in terms of should we believe the international community or not? And it's a reality. Yes, international community has contributed in Afghanistan's development in the last 20 years, but they would not have been able to do this if Afghans were not there, if Afghans were not, taking the work forward, if Afghans were not taking the risks and sacrifices. But unfortunately, I see it, and I have been calling it since 15 August, a betrayal to Afghan people. It has been a betrayal. It has been a very, very irresponsible way of withdrawing from Afghanistan. Even the evacuations that they call it extraordinary evacuation of people at risk from Afghanistan has been problematic and has been very difficult. I think international community has been giving a lot of statements, has been making a lot of commitments, has been talking a lot about human rights gains, about women's rights, about not giving up on the gains. I heard from Ms. Bhatia about UN's commitments. They have to put those commitments into practice. They have to show it. We are not asking anything else. We are just, I think, the demand and the expectation of Afghan people from international community is that when you announce your full withdrawal from Afghanistan, what international community say, there is going to be a military withdrawal from Afghanistan, but there will be development and diplomatic support in Afghanistan. When Taliban took over, they left. They just, they were sitting with Taliban in Doha, but then the minute Taliban entered Kabul, they just left, and there wasn't any diplomatic, and there isn't any diplomatic presence right now. So, I want to particularly refer to the last statement, joint statement that over 90 countries gave just on, I think, 30th August or 29th August, just before completion of U.S. Military presence in Afghanistan, stating that there will be safe passage for people at risk, stating that evacuations will continue, stating that protection will be a key, most priority for people in Afghanistan, stating that the work on human rights and women's rights and the gains of women's rights will be protected. I honestly don't see much in practice. Yes, it's very soon. Yes, it has happened in a very high speed, and things are very bad and things are turning further bad. But I think international community has to speed up. They have to get out of their bureaucracies when it comes to address the crisis situation in a country like Afghanistan, which is very, very complex, which is very difficult to work in. I think one last bit is that international community has to put their words into practice, and the same as what I say to the Taliban. You can't go with a male delegation, sit with Taliban and talk about women's rights. I'm sorry. That doesn't work. You have to respect women's rights when you have women in your delegation. You can't just normalize that it's okay. Men business is okay. Men to men business is fine. I don't think it is fine. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Samira. Connects me to the next question. Ms. Bhatia, are there any lessons regarding the international support from America's withdrawal from Afghanistan due to its own lack of domestic support? Are there any lessons to be learned for the international community?
Gosh, I mean, one could talk about this for a very long time. So, let me just say one thing, because I was very struck by Samira's statement, and I think I saw something in the chat about, this issue of male representation and male involvement. So let me comment on that. Among the first UN officials who met with the Taliban was the Emergency Relief Coordinator, the head of OCHA, Martin Griffiths. And when he met with the Taliban, there were women from the UN across the table talking to the Taliban. So I just want people to know that, there is no question that it's just men talking to men as far as the UN is concerned. The head of our office in Afghanistan is a woman who is, who has been there since the beginning of the crisis. Our country representative is a woman. She's just on leave for a short period of time. So we have somebody there right now who is a man. But actually, the key person on our side and most of the people in our office are women. And we are not changing the composition of our workforce. If anything, we have beefed up the presence and the support that we are providing to our office long distance. It is very important that this agenda of women's rights not be just a women's agenda and fought for only by women. We need men to stand up and to also make the case and to engage on the issue of women's rights, because this battle cannot be won just by women. It is a very important battle, and women's voices are extremely crucial, but we also need to make sure that there are men who are pushing this agenda, not just the women. Both need to be engaged, and this is an issue that goes beyond the issue just of women's rights. It is an issue for the international community as it thinks about the future of Afghanistan. And it is basically an issue that determines the success of UN efforts in Afghanistan. We have said this in many of our public statements that we have been issuing since the crisis, that this is the litmus test for the Taliban will be whether or not they adhere to what they have said on women's rights, but it is an agenda that needs to be owned by all.
Thank you so much. I think, Ms. Bhatia, you have to take our leave.
I do.
You have another appointment. Thank you so much for your time. Moving from her to Ambassador Rahmani, there is a
Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There is a question that is directly linked to what she said. Are there Afghan men in positions of power that can serve as allies in the effort to maintain the gains Afghan women have made?
Well, it depends which men you are talking about, because the current government that the Taliban has announced is not even inclusive of all the men. They are barely including all the different ethnic groups. It is far from anything called inclusive. So the men who would believe in women empowerment, that is, I assume they are also not in a position to influence this current government or have any say with them. Who would be the man who could? In fact, let me talk about something different in this and highlight that from the information that I have, there are some people, mostly more senior men, among the Taliban leadership who wanted to show some level of leniency towards women's empowerment or women's rights in general. I'm using the word leniency because it is nothing like accepting what women should and had in the past. But they were suppressed. They were attacked by the other members of the group. And in addition, they have been holding it together because they cannot tell their ranks and files that what we taught you in the past 20 to 30 years is wrong. Or you can act differently. They also have issues with holding up together. So there is a whole range of issues that prevents or creates the situation. And it's very simple. It's a group that have a very clear disposition towards women and women's rights. They have run on that platform. They have advocated on that platform. And I am afraid that there aren't many men to respond to your question that would be among the more influential with them that could make a difference.
Thank you. We're really running short of time, but there are some questions trickling in. There is one question, Farida, for you. Aside from the international community and foreign government pressure, is there anything the Afghan women journalists can do to continue in their careers and preserve their individual rights? Farida, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the question? Sorry, I was just, yeah.
Okay. The question is, aside from the international community and foreign government pressure, is there anything that Afghan women journalists can do to continue in their careers and preserve their individual rights?
Yes, actually, oops, okay. Yes, actually, we see practically journalists, women, especially women journalists, has their really very important role in the especially human rights and women rights issues regarding different issues. So I think they can even, if they have the particular participation in the media and the community, of course, they will be definitely be effective on the changing of this condition, and it will be much more useful for the individual as well. I think so.
Thank you. There is a question, Samira, quick one, please. What is the current situation regarding the security of Afghan women? I know you can speak for hours, but a quick response would be ideal given the constraints of time. Thank you.
There is a lot of uncertainty on what's going on. Of course, you know, Taliban have lists of women, especially working women, women activists, women who have been vocal and who have been in the media, women judges, women lawyers who have prosecuted actually these some of these people. They are going into house searches. They are looking for you know, more information about these women. Of course, the security is very uncertain when it comes to women who would like to go out on the street, who would like to protest, who want to exercise their, you know, freedom of assembly and freedom of expression. Women, for example, in media, in some media have been told to just go back to their homes and that they're not allowed. There is a lot of fear. There are a lot of women leaders. There are a lot of women activists who are right now stuck in Afghanistan in different parts of the country, and they are just hidden. They are just, they have lost their voice, they have lost their contribution, and it's nowhere, I would say, safe for them to come out and to be, to do anything. And it clearly, right now that I'm talking, the head of female prison in Herat was called by the Taliban 1 week back. She was a police officer to come and resume her job because there are women prisoners that she needs to look at the prison. Since 1 week, she's missing. Nobody knows about her whereabouts. She's not reachable. She's not accessible. And the fear is that, if they actually call every woman to come back, resume your job, and then they disappear them and harm them, where is peace and where is safety for women? So unfortunately, women are not safe right now in Afghanistan.
Thanks, Amira. Farida, there's a quick question, again, for a very, very quick, brief response. What is your opinion of the international media coverage of Afghan women?
Yes, I should say some of them, yes, they're really doing their best because they're bringing the issues and the problem and challenges, different aspects, life of women journalists, women human rights activists, grassroots. It means the different aspects they're trying to be covered and bring the woman on the page. But unfortunately, as expected, and somehow they're not, because if you see in some media organization, most of their headline is something like focus on the security, but they forget women. So it is, as Samira mentioned, recently, this current situation for women. It means, of course, it is, I should say, this is not something like due the security problem and these challenges should be like at the screen. But what is happening, what is going on with the woman, it is really dangerous, because recently I had a message from our representative, their family members, it's about 1 week, she's disappeared with her child. While she was a social and civil society activist, and she was also in a position that she's concerning about. And the last week, 2 weeks ago, a woman take call from the side that, okay, your cases under, and she was like invited to come to this place. We have like something for your case, your application, something. After that, when she go to the police, they threw the acid. So many cases happen, but the international community not bring them. Of course, the local media, because of this restriction and of course their safety, they can't bring, but the international community should find these such stories and bring to the faces of the media and the public that they should aware.
Thank you. Finally, to Ambassador Rahmani, just for 1 minute response, sorry about the time constraint. Have societal values in Afghanistan changed in the last 20 years? And if so, are those societal norms resilient and likely to survive the Taliban's return? Finally, have there been any religious reform movements within Afghanistan that have redefined women's inclusion in society? 2 questions in one and 1 minute, sorry.
Yes, there has been shifts in mindset, and it may sustain so long as the rule of the Taliban does not deepen its roots too much down to the society, to the extent that it would be wiped out of the memories due to oppression, hunger, or many other reasons. Has there been attempts to redefine the religion or reinterpretation of it within the country? Yes, but not as much as in other Muslim countries, because everything happens within the context of the society, and Afghanistan has not been necessarily an very conservative, religiously conservative society historically. Samira spoke about it before from historic perspective. It has been always more on the moderate side. So there has been some efforts, but they cannot challenge this simply because it's not about religion. You could, I remember very well, there was one time that we challenged Taliban's views and the legitimacy of jihad, and the statement came out of Mecca. They said, no, this is not acceptable. Now the center of their religious fatwa we are affecting, that we can take inspiration from is in Karachi. So they can move the center of the religion inspiration. So it's not really about the religion. So the redefining religion would not necessarily be the tool with them either.
Thank you so much. But before I hand over the microphone to Susan, I just want to end by thanking every panelist for all your time, for all your insights. And I would also like to close with a quote from Ambassador Rahmani. What happens to Afghanistan is going to depend on what happens to women of Afghanistan. Thank you so much for your time. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Dilrakshi. That quote struck me as well. There were many quotes today that struck me so deeply. I want to thank our moderator, Dilrakshi, and our distinguished panelists, Ambassador Rahmani, Assistant Secretary General Bhatia, Farida, and Samira. Our speakers have shared their personal experiences, perspectives, and vast knowledge of Afghanistan. And really nothing helps the world understand the situation in Afghanistan better than hearing such firsthand knowledge. Thanks to you all for giving a historic and a broader view of Afghan women. And please know that we care about what happens in your country. We wish the best to you, your families, friends, colleagues, and all people of Afghanistan. We will be watching and helping as best we can. Thank you again. And thank you also to our viewers for attending today's EWC seminars live. We hope you will join us in early November for our next program that will focus on China-US relations. Please check our website for updated program information at www.eastwestcenter.org/EWC seminars live. Thank you all again, and aloha from the East West Center.